Alright, y'all, so today I want to do a very quick review of The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the finale to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy. This film was directed by Peter Jackson, obviously. It was released in 2003, and of course, like I already mentioned, it's the finale to the book series, and of course, the finale to this motion picture trilogy. I'm going to give you my initial thoughts, my pros and cons, and my overall opinions on Return of the King, and maybe even a little synopsis. So, first, for my initial opinions on The Return of the King. Well, endings are a very complicated thing in any kind of medium that you're trying to create, right? Whether that's comic books, whether that's TV shows, whether that's movies, trying to stick the landing, so to speak, and nail it is always kind of a challenging thing. It's a little bit, like I said, a little bit hard. And there's been a lot of franchises I know where the ending doesn't really land as well. It doesn't mean the quality, like I said, the stuff before that was bad, but the ending itself was pretty weak. And I'm really proud to say that The Return of the King doesn't fall into those traps. I would say overall, The Return of the King is a really solid ending to the trilogy. A lot of arcs and character beats and all that stuff get resolved here. A lot of course, the main journey, the main plot thread with the ring gets resolved here. And it's just like I said, it's a definitive ending to the Lord of the Rings and the saga that all started back with the Fellowship of the Ring. And, there's really not much more I can ask for. I mean, it definitely sticks to landing for the most part, even though I will say with this movie, there are some minor bugs and flaws that do bother me, but I think overall this is a really good and great film overall. Now for a little bit of a synopsis. I'm going to give you obviously the very brief rundown. It follows the events of the Two Towers. Sauron, so to speak, is sending out more orc armies to attempt to capture and conquer Gondor. And basically, the other characters, Gimli, Legolas, Gandalf the White, Aragorn, have to rush to defend Gondor alongside the allied forces of Rohan, who have now joined the battle. After a really long struggle that they almost lose, with even the orcs charging a fortress city in Gondor. Eventually, they succeed with Aragorn basically getting a ghost army that's solely it has a sort of alliance to the old royal line of Gondors, which Aragorn is a part of. They successfully turn the battle, and then obviously at the end of the story, kind of, Frodo and Sam make their way into Mordor, and they eventually, after some struggle with Gollum, eventually the ring and Gollum get dropped into the Mountain of Doom, and they succeed in their journey. And all the characters kind of resolve, and the story really comes to a conclusion. I know that's a very, very brief rundown. I'm assuming if you've watched this video, you might have seen the movie, but I sometimes like to mention just for some people who are interested in the movie still. Now to start with my pros. Overall, let's get into the very basics of it. Visuals. The CGI is really solid in this movie. There's not really too many moments that I can really say, oh, there's some really iffy CGI here and there. There's not really. I mean, there's some moments here and there, like during the battle sequences, like maybe with the giant looking, I think they're called elephants. You can arguably say, oh, that looks, not totally too realistic. But like I said, I am really surprised how great this movie looks still. The visuals, the combination of CGI, and I think what really helps this movie is the combination of miniatures and practicals, because it makes this movie, really age a lot more better than maybe something like the Hobbit movies, which used tons of CGI and tons of VFX that I personally think don't look quite as good as the Lord of the Rings films. So visuals, outstanding. Acting from all people involved, really great. Character-wise, everything is really solid here. I mentioned this previously, but I also really like in this movie how everything comes to a nice conclusion, and a lot of story beats are nicely wrapped up here. For example, the whole thing they were teasing with Aragorn that he could possibly become the king again. Well, like the title suggests, he becomes the king of Gondor at the end. His romantic elf interest, I believe her name was Arwen, could be mistaken. Sorry if I did. But she comes back to play here more so than the last movie, but obviously it comes to a conclusion with him two reuniting. And, makes a lot of sense, right? That was a plot there that was started at the beginning. Obviously, Frodo and Sam finally, dropping the ring in the Mount Doom and the lava, finally destroying the ring. That was a pretty great resolution to the story. The stakes, the tension of it. I mean, you really feel like you're on a journey with this movie, but it's all worth it at the end. They successfully do so. Also, the battle scenes. The battle scenes are really cool in this movie. They're really elaborate. I would say they're bigger in this movie, but it's really awesome. The orc armies attacking the fortress in Gondor. That was pretty crazy. That was really awesome. Even they introduced some kind of mercenaries and human allies of Sauron, riding these giant elephants. That was a really interesting element to the battle that was added to kind of spice things up, but it was really cool and interesting. I really enjoyed more of the variety. I will say, though, the Battle of Helm's Deep, at least for me personally, is unflawed. I still prefer that one. That's the definitive battle of the trilogy. But this is a really solid and great climactic battle to it. I don't have too many complaints. And, like I said, there's enough visually that looks great, and I like how it doesn't really overstay its welcome, especially at the end with the Ghost Army rushing in and saving the day, so to speak. That was all really cool stuff. I also like a lot of action. I like a lot of scenes in this. I like a lot of scenes where Frodo and Sam are struggling and they're kind of reminiscing and remembering all the good things in the Shire, so to speak, and giving them the motivation to go along. That was really cool. I also really liked Gollum. Now, I really liked him in the last movie, The Two Towers, but here we even get more backstory for him, which was really awesome. So you get even more of a sense of the character and what he's all about, and of course the tragic and sad end with him basically plunging into the lava with the ring. Really sad, but like I said, all really cool stuff, and I like the additional backstory. And I like a lot of the characters and stuff. And I think a lot of plot beats are pretty similar, especially with the king and Fathomir. It's all pretty cool stuff. And I really like how, like I said, the movie kind of bookends things at the end. Character stories are wrapped up. And it's a really solid ending to the series. And there's also, like I said, many great moments. I like the scene at the very end, like the last battle where the orc armies have surrounded the forces of Gondor and Rohan. And at this point, kind of the leader, I guess at this point he might have been already king, but Aragorn rushes out to basically charge the enemy. Iconic shot, right? Iconic moment in the series. Iconic moment. Also love the scene where the Rohan army arrives to help out Gondor. And that was an amazing sequence with all the horses charging. Really great stuff. Really climactic stuff. Really cool stuff. Even the Tower of the Eye of Sauron getting destroyed at the end. Great scene. Great, action sequence, I guess you can call it. Really cool stuff. Yeah, like I said, I know a lot of people do complain about this movie in terms of the ending, which pacing-wise, people say, it drags on for a bit, which I think it does a little bit, but it's more like the movie is just trying to, like I said, firmly close all the chapters and firmly bookend everything. And I feel like maybe with the extended version, it goes on for way longer. So I don't think it's quite as bad. And, like I said, they're just trying to book and everything. But it's not a huge flaw. And pacing-wise, this film is great as well. There's not really too much fluff. Everything is very tight and concise in this movie. It runs over a little bit 3 hours this time. But, it's very tight. It's very concise. Everything you need to know about the story of the characters is here. And all the action sequence are present, so to speak. And, it's really, really solid. So yeah, that's my kind of basically my pros. And I really enjoyed some sequences. Even though I will say there are some sequences I wish there were in the theatrical version, and I'm not exactly sure are in. Like, I think they are in the extended version. I haven't seen it, frankly, in a long time. But, like, for example, the Mouth of Sauron, I think I remember correctly, that really creepy dude that I think offers to surrender some of the forces at the end with the final battle. But I can't exactly remember if that was in the movie or not, or the extended version. I could be mistaken. That's why I might rewatch these movies, the extended versions, which if y'all want me to watch them, definitely let me know down below in the comments. But yeah, this was overall, for the most part of my pros, the biggest, pro I can really say about this movie, it's a very much nice conclusion of all the storylines, arcs, and characters for the most part. And, you really can't, like I said, they mostly stuck the landing to the trilogy. And, Climax, one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Now let's get into some of my cons with the movie, because I think, I think for the most part, this movie is really solid and really well done. There's some minor tweaks and flaws with this movie that I want to address. I wanted to give you my thoughts on. Number one, Saruman doesn't come back. Now, I was kind of expecting, at least in the second movie or third movie, that there would have been some kind of final confrontation between the two instead of him just staying in his tower, which I'm assuming was in the extended version for the second or the third movie. But that part of it, kind of bugged me a little. And there's also the queen, or the daughter of the king of Rohan, who they're hinting that might have a romance towards Aragorn. I mean, you can view it different ways, but that kind of storyline kind of went nowhere, which I was a bit surprised, but just wanted to point that out there. It was a little bit weird how that didn't really go anywhere, but at the same time, I do think it's kind of nicely wrapped up with Aragorn just refusing her advances, or kind of giving her, I don't know, I guess it's just talking to her about it. And, overall, like I said, besides those little flaws, I mean, you can really say, for the most part, I don't have too many flaws with this movie. I kind of, like I said before, it does a little bit bug me sometimes. Frodo wasn't the one that really dropped the ring. More like, at this point, I guess the ring had really consumed him. And it was really until Gollum showed up and the two scuffled over it that then eventually Gollum fell into the lava of the ring, which you can view it certain ways. I view it as Frodo basically, he could have, like I said, been totally, like I said, 100% obsessed and devoted to the ring, taken over by it, that then he would decide, I'm going to jump down to the lava to get my precious, so to speak, like Gollum, of course, would have done. But there's always that little part of Frodo, that little part of struggle, resistance. I guess you can call it maybe a little bit of, humanity in him still. That, he decided to let the ring go in a way. And, Gollum would drop into the water, or the lava with the ring, because he's so totally overcome by it. But yeah, like I said, that scene's pretty interesting. I believe it happened in the book. But, yeah, it's kind of my opinion of it. It's not even really a nitpick or anything, just kind of a weird thing to explain. But yeah, I don't have too many complaints about this movie. I think it's a really solid ending to the trilogy, really solid overall. And, I don't have too many glaring issues besides maybe the Saruman thing and, I don't know, some other, like I said, the romantic interest between the daughter of the king and Aragorn kind of went nowhere. I'm not sure why that was being set up. But other than that, like I said, pretty solid ending, and all the characters have a nice conclusion. But, yeah. So, yeah, overall, that's my opinions of The War of the Rings, Return of the King. Really solid ending to one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. Absolutely, these films hold up, at least theatrically, the ones that I've seen absolutely hold up. They're really solid, really big, really concise, really epic in scale. And, there's, like I said before, the acclaim these movies get, the Oscars they won, the influence these movies have had over really everything that's came after the fact, War of the Rings related, Tolkien related, is, in my opinion, mostly pretty well deserved. I mean, these are really well done adaptations of the source material. And this movie in particular, The Return of the King, was a really solid ending that I think mostly stuck the landing, so to speak, for the trilogy. But yeah, that's my thoughts on War of the Rings, Return of the King, to quickly wrap up. Hopefully you all have a good day, and peace, y'all.